Hello and welcome to another session at ORF Middle East. Our guest today, Mohammed Baharoon, is the Director General of the Dubai Public Policy Research Center, Bhuth, established in 2002 in Dubai, UAE. And my name is Mahdi Ghuloom, Junior Fellow at ORF Middle East. Our conversation today is going to be about a new Middle East and whether we are at risk of the region staying the same despite the critical junctures that it's facing. So my first question to you, Mr. Baharoon, is what are the most persistent challenges facing the Middle East?
I think one of the main challenges that has persisted since possibly the formation of countries in the Middle East is the challenge of statehood, a fragile state versus a stable state. So this concept of stability, concept of conflicts, they're all leading to fragile states. And by fragile states, I'm not talking only in the political sense. There's also economic fragility, and then there is also security fragility that comes from either geopolitical competition or the type of dependency on one actor over another actor.
Mm.
So these changes has been with us. Some countries has moved away, have developed themselves differently. Others have suffered the same type of challenges for about now, 50, 60 years.
And so you're mentioning kind of persistent challenges that are not going away. Now, but the region has seen a lot of critical junctures, a lot of important events over the past few years, over the past year even. And in your view, what were the most important recent such critical junctures in the region?
Now, I think at least from the way we look at it in the UAE, maybe COVID was a very important juncture because it has shifted people's thinking away from the traditional constructs of what makes national security.
Mm.
And whether it's all about building walls or do we need to replace building walls with building roads. And by that, I mean having more cooperation with the world around you rather than either competition or hedging against it. So I think that is a critical juncture. But it has also reminded us that we're now in a position where we need to reinvest in statehood.
Mm.
And by reinvestment, I mean we have situations in Syria, for instance,
Mm.
where there's almost a new republic being born,
Yes.
and it would require a lot of reinvestment. Lebanon is refining itself right now,
Yeah.
breaking away from the oversized role Hezbollah used to play in Lebanon, particularly in the security side. So that is a Iraq is in formation. It has been in formation for a while. It seems to be finding its way, but that formation is based on state and state to state relationship. What we're also seeing is trans-regional cooperation becoming more visible than regional cooperation.
Mm.
And you'll see things like the IMEC, for instance,
Right.
which is connecting Asia to Europe, but it's also connecting the Middle East. And for IMEC to work, the railroad within the GCC have to work very well, which will mean more collaboration between GCC on policy matters, on strategic decisions on free trade agreements and others. So it will require a lot. We'll see the development road that is possibly going to change the type of uh, dynamics between Iraq and Turkey,
Mm.
which was quite tense at a certain point of time. It has already, in my view, changed the dynamics between Turkey and the Kurds.
Mm.
So these trans-regional junctures, corridors, you know, are changing the type of thinking that leads to understanding or re-understanding what is our relationship with our, surrounding, and how could the outer surrounding, in this case, India or Europe, have a bigger impact than your immediate surrounding.
So this is very interesting. So you've mentioned critical junctures that are coming up that are possibly going to lead to changes. Now, I want to just rein the conversation a bit back to what critical junctures do you think made lasting change already? So we were talking about Syria, we're talking about Iraq, Lebanon, we're talking about these economic corridors, about the changes that and the junctures they represent in the Middle East future. But in the past, what has been, let's say, besides the pandemic, which I think you're spot on there, what has been the most impactful critical juncture, or some of the most impactful critical junctures? And
Well, this concept of polarity
okay.
has pretty much drawn the lines in relationship between countries. And, there were a time, for instance, in the Arabian Peninsula, you've got southern Yemen and an eastern Yemen, and each of them belonged to a different camp. One was closer to the US, the other was closer to Russia
Yeah.
or Soviet Union at that point.
Yeah.
And that polarity has ended and it has created, but now we've got different type of polarity,
Okay.
which is an economic polarity, particularly between the US and China. And it's affecting the way people are thinking and weathering their relationship.
So you're, if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying kind of the great power competition is shaping the region differently, but still shaping the region.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And this brings us very well.
Now,
Please
I
go
have
ahead.
to say that changing the region to what?
Yes.
And I think it's this type of competition would possibly lead the region. I mean, we've heard a lot about this concept of multipolarity.
Right.
And in the multipolarity structure, people would bring in countries like China plus Russia and the US. Others will bring EU, others will bring in India.
Right.
And I think multipolarity, if it becomes really multipolarity,
Right.
it's an apole of world order. It cannot have multipolarity.
Right.
Too many poles means no poles. And I think that is the way forward, is to look at relationship based on connectivity rather than polarity. You don't have to belong to one team if you want, but you'd have to have a connectivity that allows you to connect to all different servers if you want.
Amazing. And this just brings us very well to kind of the final chapter of this conversation. And kind of many view the region from the perspective of being majorly affected by administrative changes in the United States. So now with Trump 2.0, the conversation is about how Trump is going to shape the region, or Trump's administration. Do you agree with this kind of analysis? And
Every president
right.
will have his mark. In my view, the one who really reshaped the region was President Obama,
Okay.
because he was the one who decided or found out or strategically positioned China as the major competitor to the US rather than Russia.
Wow.
And since then, we've been seeing this pivot. Asia was a pivot against China, practically. And even today, discussions on the rapprochement between US and Russia to solve is partly based on bringing Russia to become closer to the US rather than create a partnership with China. So it is effective. So each president will have his. I think the style of presidents would possibly differ, but the realities on the ground will continue to be the realities of the. One of those realities that has plagued the region is this concept of occupation.
Right.
Because occupation leads to resistance. Resistance leads to different reiterations of resistance, including jihad. And people invoke religion into it, people invoke pan-Arabism into it, identity into it, and turns into identity wars. And I think this is part of the things we're trying to cope with. That's why the Abrahamic Accord is called an Abrahamic Accord, because it was supposed to bring it down back to be a political dispute rather than a conflict of identity between either Muslims, Arabs, or Christians, which is endless.
Right. And are there kind of we seem to agree on kind of the influential role of the United States in the region, and are there other influential actors in the region, outside of the region, that analysts should pay more attention
So,
to?
of course, the region itself.
The region itself.
The region itself now is creating its own agency,
Okay.
far more than before. And I think that is the best thing that has happened so far.
Right. So not change, but influence from within.
Yeah.
That influence is taking itself outside.
Amazing. And I guess we could end with this final question. If you were to hope for one future prospect for the region, I think you've hinted at some. What would it be?
Well, if I had Aladdin's lamp,
Right.
had one wish, I would say, end the occupation, get a Palestinian state, and let us all sign the Arab Peace Accord, where all of the Arab and Islamic nations would recognize Israel when Israel recognizes Palestine. I think it will help the connectivity agenda in our region.